All right, several weeks ago, when I taught class, we looked at Joseph, and I love Joseph's story. It's just there's a lot there. So today we're going to do Joshua. So if you want to take your Bible and turn to Joshua, I told Alex, I said, I'm not going to try to roll on with his stuff because he spent so much time preparing. It just doesn't seem quite fair when you spend that much time preparing for somebody else to ride in and take something from you. So I said, I'm going to do something totally off our subject, and then he can come in next Tuesday and teach Isaiah again. But we're going to be in Joshua. So if you want to start in chapter 1, that's fine. We're going to wind up in chapter 13 in just a minute. And really where we're going to wind up, Joshua has a sort of a minimal part, but you got to understand some of the background before we can get to that. So you are familiar with the story of Joshua. Yes, you know the story of Joshua. Joshua follows who? Moses. All right, so Moses is called the servant of God, the friend of God, and Joshua has to fill that role. So what does God tell him in Joshua chapter 1? What would you say is the theme of chapter 1?
You keep standing, be strong and courageous.
That's it. 4 words. It is the theme of chapter 1. Be strong and courageous. Having coached for a long time, I got to coach some really good players, really good basketball players. But inevitably, because they're young men, they would get injured somehow, right? That would happen. And you might have a kid that was really good that might not get to play in a certain game. So that kid that's really good, that all of his teammates are depending on him, is sitting over there in street clothes, no jersey. So we have to go in the locker room and tell all those other players, you guys can do this without him. You can do it. I have total faith in you. You can do it. To me, that's similar to what you see here. Moses has been a star, for lack of a better term. And now Moses is gone. And it's not like Moses is going to miss a game or two. Moses is dead. And Joshua is looking around, realizing now, this is all on me to get this done. Well, it's one thing to have your coach tell you you can do it. It's one thing to have your spouse tell you, hey, you know what? I believe in you. You can do it. It's one thing to have your children tell you, Dad, Mom, we believe in you. You can do it. Your church family, hey, you can do it. We think you can do it. But there's always that part of you that goes, I don't know. I'm not sure. Well, what about if God told you? Not the way we have it now, but audibly told you, I believe in you. Be strong and courageous. You can do this. Now, it's easy for us to say, well, if that's the case, I can run through a brick wall. I'll take on anybody. If God told me out loud, I believe in you. Be strong and courageous. I'm not going anywhere. I'm with you. But the human side of you, Joshua is human. And what I want you to zone in on is in verse 9. There's a question asked. There's the theme stated again. But then I want you to pay attention to the last sentence of verse 9. So here's the question. What's the question in verse 9? This is God speaking. What's his question? Have I not commanded you? You catch the tone? Eric has got my attention on that this week. I don't know if y'all have been able to hear him or go back and watch it. I encourage you to do so. One of the things he's got my attention on is reading tone in the text. So you can pick up on the way things are written, and it tells you the meaning in some ways of what is written. This is one of those moments. This isn't intended to be a slap on the hand. This is a reminder from a father to a son. I've told you before, right? Have I not commanded you? Joshua, I've been in charge. You can trust me. So that's his question. Then there's the theme. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Look, Joshua, I've been in charge before. I've told you to be strong and courageous. I'm going to remind you again, be strong and courageous. But it's the last sentence. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed. All right. specifically and especially when God speaks and he uses two words, he means for them to be used specifically the way they're used. Is being frightened different from being dismayed?
Disappointed, dismayed, right?
Okay. Is that different from being frightened? It is. Has to be. Otherwise, there's no reason for God to use both of these words. If they mean the same thing, if they're synonymous, then there's no reason to use them. You could say it in one word. So God chooses his words the way he wants them understood. So do not be frightened is one thing. Do not be dismayed is another.
Terrified.
Right. So if you're going to be frightened is different than being dismayed. Dismayed is kind of I'm disappointed that something didn't go my way, or I'm just kind of discouraged. I'm kind of down based on the things that are going on around me. Frightened is totally different from that. Eric said on Sunday, he said there was this thing that he had read that fear stands for false evidence appearing real. And he said, that's a false teaching. He said, it's okay to be afraid. That's not fake. That's not false evidence. That's real. If a bear comes barreling through that door right there, I'm not going to say, well, that's false evidence. I'm afraid because of false evidence. No, I'm afraid because there's a bear in the annex. That's a real thing.
But don't just be dismayed. If I don't give you a gun, you'll be able to shoot that.
Now, there you go. So now if I've got a weapon, then my fright level goes down, doesn't it?
Oh, because I'm shooting myself.
That'd be my problem. I'd blow my toes off before I could level off at the bear. But there's two different words here. And I thought it's interesting. God sees right into Joshua's soul. He sees right into who Joshua is. And he says, Joshua, don't be frightened. Don't be dismayed. Think about where Joshua's at. Some estimates, Wendell, help me out here, the number of the children of Israel. Some estimate, the low end is like 500,600,000. The high end is 2-3 million, perhaps, maybe.
Yeah, at least 600,000 men fighting in there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you think 600,000 fighting men plus the women and the children. I mean, you're looking at. I mean, even a conservative estimate is 1 million people.
You're looking like China.
I mean, yeah, it's a massive amount of people walking around out there. And Joshua looks down and goes, I'm in charge of all those people. To me, that's the dismayed part. I can see that easily. What a discouragement that would have been to think one man and I got 1 million people that I'm trying to keep up with. You know, it's almost like you can envision Joshua looking at Moses and going, how did you do this? We know how he did it. Moses appointed people to sort of rule over portions of it by his father-in-law's great advice. But Joshua's concerned about that. What is the frightened part for?
Fail.
What's he fixing to do? What does Joshua know he's about to do? They're about to go into the promised land, and what are they going to have to do when they get there?
Fight everyone there.
Fight every person there. Does it make sense for Joshua to be a little bit down and maybe a little bit scared? Makes perfect sense. Now think about what the theme is. Think about what God's command to him is. What is God's command or the theme of chapter 1?
Strong.
And
Good.
courageous. Be strong and courageous. Now, does that answer the fear and the dismay? Do those two words, strong and courageous, handle fear and dismay? Yes. So the theme matches perfectly with what Joshua is dealing with. Those are not words to just be, carved into a piece of wood or something and said, look, be strong, courageous. It said so, Joshua chapter 1. That's what you should do. No. You got to understand, God didn't say those to be cliche. God didn't say those so that people would be like, oh, that's cute. Let me put that, let me embroidery that on something and put it in my house. It was an answer to Joshua's very real problem. A very real problem. Your very real problem is, Joshua, you are scared. You are down. You are worried. You are anxious. That is a very real problem. Here's the answer. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. I can handle this. So verses 10 through the end of the chapter.
On verse 9.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just don't, this NIV says terrified,
Terrified.
which is different than fear.
Mm-hmm.
It's you're gonna be scared, but terrified is a different, I guess what I'm saying is don't go in there and,
Terrified is almost paralyzing.
that's what I was.
It's fear multiplied. It's to be terrified of something means it has taken ownership of you. Like fearful is, a bear comes through that door. I am afraid of what that bear could do to me if he gets to me. But I also know in the back of my mind, there's another door right there. And if I can beat him to that door, I can get out of it.
You're faster than us.
That's taking some liberties with the word fast, but all right, I'll believe you. That's kind of that fear thought. Terrified would be that thing opens the door, comes in, busts through the door. And because of my fear multiplied, I don't move. It's panicked almost, I guess. But terrified it's a step up from just being afraid of something. It is. And you think about it, Joshua is terrified. And God knows it. God sees it.
You mentioned it earlier at the end of verse 1, God tells him, just as I've been with Moses, I'll be with you, I'll not fail you nor forsake you. And then he, in a little stronger way, emphasizes that down in verse 9.
Oh, yeah. And you think about how many different things Joshua has been a witness to over these 40 years in the wilderness. How many times he's seen God literally do what he says he's going to do over and over again. And yet still the human side of Joshua says, but God, I've never been in charge of however many number of this people. God, I've never led these people where I'm about to have to lead them to.
It's one thing to watch Moses do it. It's another thing to step
It's
up.
a whole different thing when it's all your call. I mean, it's vastly different when all of a sudden you're not the assistant anymore, right? Because that's what he's titled in verse 1, Moses' assistant. Then verse 2 says, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now, therefore, arise and go over this Jordan. Now, Joshua, you're in. This is you. You're in. Now, what I love verse 10. After this little pep talk, after this little communication between God and Joshua, what does Joshua do? Verse 10. Took command.
And he gave them a message.
And he says, all right, God told me, now I'm going to tell you. I love it. The picture that I get, and no, they're not the same people, but they do actually share similar names. It's the picture I get is when Jesus goes into the garden and he prays and he comes back out and his disciples are asleep and he goes back in and he prays. He comes back out and they're asleep, goes back in and he prays. And when he comes out the third time, he says, arise and let's go. See, my attacker or my betrayer is at hand. When Jesus goes in to pray the first time, Jesus is very, very emotionally disturbed because he knows what's coming. And he actually asks if there be any other way. And he does that 3 different times. He goes into the garden and he prays 3 different times. If there be any other way, yet not my will, but yours be done. 3 different times. And the third time, he has his answer. The answer is, there is no other way. This is what we're doing. And when he comes out the third time, there's no more fear. There's no more trepidation. There's no more nervousness. There's no more worry. If anything, he is galvanized to the fact of what we're about to do. Now get up. Here comes the betrayer. Let's go. It's a different, I won't say it's not a different person, but it's almost a different tone when Jesus comes out the third time. It's that idea of he set his face towards Jerusalem. You remember that phrase about him? Which is to say, I know what I'm going to do, and I know what's going to happen when I get there. Now, the rest of y'all need to saddle up and come on. And that's what the picture is here. I know it's not for the same reason, but it is similar in their tone as Joshua stands up and says, okay, I got my marching orders. No more fear. No more being terrified. No more dismay. Now, let me tell y'all what we're about to go do. And that's verses 10, well, verses 11 to verse 15. And then verse 16, you get their response. What is their response? All that you have commanded us to do, we will do. Wherever you send us, we will go. Just as we obeyed Moses in all things, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. So it works, right? It works. Joshua brings his problems to God. God answers them with 4 words: be strong and courageous. Joshua takes that, pours it out on the people, and the people say, we're with you. Everything you commanded us to do, we're going to do. Wherever you tell us to go, that's where we'll go. They close out the chapter with, whoever rebels against your commandment, disobeys your words, whatever you command him shall be put to death. Only, what do they say? Well, I wonder where they heard that. I know Alex is big on, hey, circle this, and I've lost track of what color I'm supposed to use. I got blue. I don't know if that's right. I tried. No, I don't know if you do, Mark. I haven't in this particular Bible that I've got in front of me, but in other Bibles, I've circled that last sentence by them, only be strong and courageous, and marked it, pushed it back to his conversation with God. Because it's interesting to know that that's what they say to him. Did they hear the conversation between God and Joshua? Did they audibly hear the conversation? No. So they had to have heard those words from who? From Joshua, right? Or Moses. I'm sure Joshua uses that. Right? Go ahead, Wendell.
I was going to say, it was probably encouraging to him when they said, just as we have obeyed Moses in all things. But I think I would have been a little bit afraid to heard that thing.
Yeah, there's no doubt. You're going to be a little bit, I don't know what the right word is, a little shaky there, right?
But I'm sure it scared him, but it would have frightened me.
So then you get into chapter 2. Okay, so we're trying to get a little background here, and then I'm going to get to chapter 13 eventually. Yeah, right. Chapter 2, what's the major event in chapter 2? Should be the title probably in your Bible. Rahab, what's she going to do? She hid the spies. Now, I want you to think about your theme from chapter 1. Do you see the theme from chapter 1 in chapter 2? No doubt, right? Rahab, what does it take for her to hide spies in her homeland? Well, you better have some courage, right? And I know there have been people, bless their hearts, I love them because God says I have to, but there's some people that like to make a big deal out of this. She lied. I understand that. All right, everybody be cool, be cool, be cool. He's here. Everybody be quiet. Shh. Hang on. Maybe if we don't move, he responds to movement. So if you don't move, he won't notice you. He's like a T-Rex. So does it take some courage? Yeah. And I know some people try to make this a big deal about her lying about them. Don't focus on that. Don't focus on that. Focus on the theme from chapter 1 being lived out in chapter 2. Rahab hides the spies. Why?
They were coming after him.
Okay. So it seems kind of strange for Rahab to hide spies that are coming to scout her homeland. Are they not her enemy? Yeah, they're her enemy. Go to verse 8. Chapter 2, Joshua chapter 2, verse 8. Before the men lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, watch these first words. I know, K-N-O-W, that the Lord has given you the land. Whoa. Wait a minute. Jericho known for their spirituality. Jericho known for their love of God. No. How in the world can Rahab utter these words? I know that the Lord has given you the land. Is the word Lord there? Is it in all caps?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? We've covered that a few times in here, I think. What does that mean when they capitalize the entire word?
Personal name of God.
Mm-hmm. She's not using some sort of offhanded generic term for a deity. It would be one thing if she said, I know that a God has given you this land. She does not use that. She uses the personal name of God, which would have drawn, I would imagine, some significant response from these men because they know that's not something everybody does. That's only intended to be used by people who have a personal connection with God. So when she says, I know that Jehovah has given you this land, that should be light bulbs, red flags, whatever you want to call it. This lady's different. She's not the same as everybody else in there. You go on and read what she says. The fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. For we have heard. Okay, I want you to notice something. There's no chance I get to what I wanted to get to today. Not a chance. I don't have time. That's okay. What does she start with? She starts with the pronoun, what? I. Verse 10, she changes the pronoun to what? Mm-hmm. Now, who's she talking about? There's two different schools of thought here, okay? One is her family. Our family, we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you devoted to destruction. As soon as we heard it, verse 11, our hearts melted, and there was no spirit left in any man because of you. That's what you need to pay attention to. The we is not collective in the sense of her family. The we is collective in what? The entire country. So what's interesting to me personally, it may not be interesting to you, and that's okay. What's interesting to me is God's reputation has preceded him. Jericho is known for what? They're not known for their love of God. What are they known for? For the walls and idol worship, and they're a military stronghold. Nobody can touch them. To get to the walls, you had to go across uphill terrain for several feet just to get to their massive walls. So you had to go across open field with, I'm sure, archers on the top of those walls, right, stationed to pick off anybody that starts to come their way. They are not known for their love of God. They're not known for their generosity. They are known for being the baddest dudes on the block. You don't mess with them. Don't come to them. They will destroy you. And yet, here's Rahab who says, number one, I know about the Lord. And what she says about him is he's already given you this land. The reason why I bring that up is this. If you take chapter 1 and you lay it right on top of chapter 2, you have God giving Joshua evidence of what he told him in chapter 1. Have I not commanded you? Have I not done this before? Joshua, can you trust me? Joshua, I'll even give you a reference. Okay, if you want to check my resume, here's a reference from somebody in Jericho who says, I know the Lord. And he's already given this land into your hand.
It's almost like Gideon.
Yes,
When he
yes.
gets called down to go up next to the tent and hear the dream interpreted. And
I'm going to give you a reference from somebody you wouldn't expect a reference from. And she lays it out there. I mean, you keep on reading, and she says, verse 11, as soon as we heard it, okay, what did she hear? They heard about the Red Sea. They heard about the kings, the Amorite kings. They heard about the devotion to destruction of these men. We've heard that. As soon as we heard it, our hearts melted. Okay, tell me what that phrase means. What does it mean, your heart melted? Is it like, oh, how sweet?
No,
Like a Valentine's Day gift of a puppy?
but everyone's
Uh-oh.
courage failed them.
Everybody's courage failed them. All right, so follow the bouncing ball here. What is God doing? He is teaching Joshua through even these reprobates. Do you know who I am, Joshua? You know how good I am? You know how great I am? Joshua, for you, I'm going to give you even more than just my own words, which should be enough, right? I mean, truthfully, we said this at the outset. If God spoke to you audibly and said, be strong and courageous, you would feel like, man, I could do anything. And God says, I'm going to give you more than that. When your spies go into Jericho, I'm going to have this lady hide them. And she is going to testify to them about how great I am. So that when they come back, they're going to tell you this, right? How else would Joshua have known to write this down? I understand inspiration, but what's the way he's going to find this information out? These spies are going to come back and tell him, right? Joshua, you're not going to believe what this lady told us. Can you imagine that conversation? When they get back, Joshua, you're not going to believe this. You're not going to believe this. There's a lady living in Jericho that said everybody in there's courage has failed. Because God helped us cross the Red Sea, because God did this to the Amorite kings. Joshua, you're not going to believe this. What is God doing for Joshua? Strengthening him, making him more courageous, giving him courage. Have I not commanded you, Joshua? Be strong and courageous. Here's you some evidence. Okay, now you can keep on reading there through chapter 2. You get to verse 24. It's the wrap up to the chapter, and it's just beautiful. It is beautiful. Here's what they said. Who's they? The spies. When the spies get back, here's their report. Truly, the Lord has given all the land into our hands. Wait a minute now. Rahab just lives in Jericho. So they're speaking on behalf of all the land. I'll tell you why. From a military strategy point of view, if you could defeat Jericho, was there anybody else in the promised land that stood a chance? No. If you beat Jericho, there's not another place out there that stands a chance. Jericho was the military stronghold. And these spies show up and they say, look, common sense tells us if Jericho's in our hands, so is everywhere else.
And also, Rahab had told them there's no courage left in any man.
That's right. There's not one man here who says, yeah, bring on the children of Israel. No, they've heard what the Lord has done, and they have no more courage left. It's incredible. And that's in their report. Truly, the Lord has given all the land into our hands, and also all the inhabitants of the land melt away. Here's the only issue that you might have to take with them. Because of who? Because of us. Wrong. 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 It's not because of us. It's because of God, right? Okay, we understand that. All right, so very quickly, when you get, I did not ask Siri to do anything. When you get into Joshua 3 and 4, you're getting the crossing of the Jordan. There's a whole lot to teach from there that I do not have time. So maybe another time we can come back to 3 and 4. There's a lot there that I love. I really love 3 and 4 a lot. Got to come back to it another time. Okay. 5 is getting the people ready. The new generation is circumcised. They have their first Passover in Canaan. It's a lot of getting ready. Okay, we've crossed the Jordan. We are about to begin this military conquest that is going to be humongous, and it's going to take a while to get that all done. So let's get the people ready. Let's direct our attention where it ought to be directed. That's why I think it's important for you to note that they handle the circumcision issue in chapter 5 and the Passover. This is before they go to the first battle. It is the idea of they cross the Jordan. Now we're in the promised land technically. We are across the Jordan. We are in the promised land. However, before we begin the actual conquest, we are going to stop and do the things that God has commanded us to do before we go any further. There was one particular evening we went to Zaxby's to eat supper. And this was when we were living over in Athens area. And we went to Madison. And it was a Sunday night after church. So there were several of us from our congregation there in Athens. We went to the Zaxby's and we sat down. And we were clamoring about who had this and who had that. We're passing food back and forth. And what'd you get to drink? And there was a family of 4 that walked in. mom, dad, 2 kids. They walk in and they sit down with their food. And before they ever opened the first bag, they sang the doxology. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. They sing this sitting in this restaurant. I mean, and it was beautiful. I mean, it had nothing to do with their vocal talent, but it was beautiful. But I'll never forget that, because I thought before they even did the thing that they came there to do, which was eat, they made sure that they handled giving thanks to God for what they had in front of them. Now, that's simple. That's a tiny little thing. But that's what you see here. Is yes, we are going into the promised land to take it. That's what Joshua told them in chapter 1. That's what Rahab told them. That was her testimony in chapter 2. All right, well, 3 and 4, they crossed the Jordan. Here we go, into battle. Wait, stop. Stop. Before we draw the first sword, before we fight the first enemy, we're going to handle the commandments of God the right way. So therefore you get, look at verse 13. Man, I love this. Woo! This is good. I don't know, when's the last time y'all read Joshua 5? It had been a while for me. I love this though. Verse 13, when Joshua was by Jericho, get the mental image. He's by Jericho, meaning you know not to go as a soldier, and Joshua was a commander, you know not to go into that open ground before the walls. So Joshua is drawn back from Jericho. He's looking, and these walls are incredible. I know to us it seems like it's just a wall. But if you consider the fact they didn't have battering rams and cannons and missiles and all that stuff, these walls were incredible. They were huge. They were thick. There was no way that a man would go to these walls and be successful in trying to take them down. It's not possible. You can't do it. You can't do it. Physically, you can't. So Joshua is standing there and he's looking at these walls. He's looking at Jericho. When Joshua was by Jericho, he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man was standing before him with his drawn sword in his hand. All right, what's your first instinct? If you don't know anything else about the rest of this little account here, what's your first instinct? The guy's got his sword drawn and he's standing in your path. Well, you better back up or you better draw.
That bear's coming at you.
That bear's coming. He's done in the annex and he's done caught me. So Joshua asks a very simple question. Are you for us or for our adversaries? The answer is what? No. Okay, wait a minute. You can't say no to that question. It's not a yes or no question. It's an either or. Are you for us or are you for the adversaries? That's not a yes or no question. That's like when you ask your kid, do you want grilled cheese or do you want pizza? And they go, yes. What? Yeah, and then what they mean is I would like both of them, thank you. It's not a yes or no question, except in this case it is. Why? Read the rest of his response. The answer is no, because why? I am the commander of the army of who? See, I got chill bumps last time I read that. That just, you envision that little picture, and Joshua's standing there and he's looking at those walls and he's thinking, I'll be honest with you, I don't know what we're going to do. I mean, these walls are massive. They're humongous. I mean, you know, he's sitting there trying to think strategy. Let's see, I guess we could try to go, if we do that, you know, and all of a sudden he turns and here is this man standing there with a sword drawn and he says, all right, are you for us or against us? No. I'm the commander of the army of Jehovah. And I love these 4 words. English Standard Version has 4 words. I am the commander of the army of the Lord, period. Now I have come. Okay. What's Joshua's response?
Worship.
Worship. Man, he gets it, doesn't he? Okay, now tie this to chapter 1. Joshua, all of the land is yours. Be strong and courageous. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Verse 9 of chapter 1. Do not be afraid and do not be dismayed. Be strong and courageous. God, that sounds good. He goes and he tells all the people, and the people are like, yeah, we're with you. Woo-hoo. Then chapter 2, Rahab. Hey, we've already heard. I know. Then chapter 3 and chapter 4, we're going to go across the Jordan. God's going to do sort of a mini version of the Red Sea with the Jordan, didn't he? Okay, what is God doing? Be strong and courageous, Joshua. I got this. This is under my control. What did Rahab say? She didn't say, I know that Joshua is a great commander and you guys are going to take over Jericho. I know the Lord has given this land into your hands. Okay. Joshua goes and he's looking at those walls of Jericho. Turns and behold, here is the commander of the army of the Lord. And then he gives that 4-word statement. Now I have come. You're talking about Joshua gets the message, right? Falls on his face, worships. And now listen to this. This is end of verse 14. What does my Lord, notice the difference. It's not all capitals. It's not even the capital L. It's lowercase. Why is he using that term? What does Lord mean in actuality?
Over you.
Somebody over you, a leader, a director, if you will. So now what has Joshua done? Joshua's the commander. I mean, he is the guy. He is in charge. He's the boss. He's the man. What does Joshua recognize right here? I'm not in charge. What does my Lord say to what? His servant. Joshua got it right there, right in that moment, right then, right there. Joshua got it. Understood. Be strong and courageous. I understand it now. When Rahab said to the spies told me, I know the Lord has given the land into your hands. I understand it. I get it. When God parted the Jordan and gave all those rules and regulations about how to get there and go back and put the stones as a memorial, and I get it now. I understand it now. And the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, take off your sandals from your feet, for the place where you're standing is holy. And Joshua did so. Joshua says, whatever you tell me now, I'm in. I am 100% in. Because now I get it. I get it. Okay. Chapter 6. You know what happens in chapter 6. It's the fall of Jericho, right? And buddy, they go in there with weapons blaring and kill everybody in there, right? Some great military conquest. They lay explosive charges at the bases of the wall and they blow up the walls. No, you know what they do. What does God tell them to do? It makes absolutely no sense, does it? Walk around. I want y'all to go out and march around. And then go back and get your tents. And then tomorrow I want you to do the same thing. 6 straight days, I just want y'all to get up, go march. 7th day, things are going to be a little different. 7th day, what does he do? March around them how many times? 7 times. At the end of the 7th time, when I give you the signal, what? Shout, make a bunch of racket. And then what does God do with that? What do the walls do? Now, can you imagine, take yourself back to the end of Joshua chapter 5, when Joshua is standing there looking at the walls, possibly out there trying to strategize and come up with a way to defeat this impenetrable force. Do you think at any moment Joshua stood there and went, I'll tell you what we could do? Is we could get everybody up and we could march around them once a day for 6 days. And then on the seventh day, we'll do 7 times. And then I'll signal and everybody will make a bunch of noise and the walls will probably just fall down. You think at any point that was part of his strategy? No. But because, go ahead.
The wall not only fell down, the people in did too.
And remember now, you got to go back to chapter 2, right? Rahab's already told them there's not a man in here that's got any courage left. Their hearts melted. They got nothing left. So if something happens, these men are going to fold. They're going to be like dominoes. It's going to be over. And that's exactly what happens. I mean, you know that's what happens. But I just keep going back to the end of chapter 5 and that picture of Joshua finally, and it's not his fault, it's just hard. Joshua finally, truly, in his heart, completely gets be strong and courageous. Not because of anything Joshua can do. Not because Joshua is some super soldier that can sling a sword better than anybody else. Not because Joshua looks around and he's got some army that is undefeated. We know that's not possible because guess what happens in chapter 7? They get beat. So it's not for that reason, but Joshua gets it at the end of chapter 5 because he looks around and says, the commander of the army, and the commander of the Lord's army says, now I have come. Hey, whatever you tell me to do, I'm in. All right, then get up and walk around the city. Done. Joshua doesn't even give any hesitation. God tells him to do it, and he's like, all right, everybody up. Everybody in line. Let's go. Can you imagine being in the, well, I don't have time for it, but I just picture getting up out of my tent every day and Joshua saying, all right, let's go walk. What? And yet works perfectly, right? Verse 27 of chapter 6, very important. It's a twofold thing, but it's very important as far as the story of Joshua goes. Verse 27 of chapter 6, the Lord was with Joshua, comma, and his fame was in all the land. All right. Some debate about what this means, by the way. Because of the way it's worded, and it may be worded differently in your Bible that you got in front of you. In mine, it's worded this way. So the Lord was with Joshua, comma, and his fame was in all the land. Some debate about what this means. A lot of people assume that it's about Joshua, right?
Dramatically, that's what it would be.
It would be Joshua. However, I'm here to sort of float the idea that perhaps because of Joshua's understanding of who God is and what God has done, maybe, just maybe, Joshua is telling people more about the Lord than even his own fame. And so maybe it's written a certain way. I'm just floating that out there. I'm not going to drill that in stone and say that's 100%. I just found it interesting the way it's worded, that it seems grammatically that it is Joshua, but at the same time, there's some indication of Joshua understanding and his humility that his power and his strength and his success hasn't come from him. It's come from God. So therefore, it seemed to be that Joshua would be telling people how he got where he got. So I just found that interesting. That's just a little side note. Okay, chapter 7, verse 1. Then I'll have to quit probably. What is the first word of verse 1 in your Bible? Chapter 7. Mm-hmm. A lot of times we see that word, it's not good. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
That Joshua 9:9 kind of supports your idea.
Okay.
The Lord. They said to him, from a very distant country, you're here
yes.
because of the name of the Lord, your God. But we have heard the report from him, in all that he did.
It's not Joshua. It's not just Joshua's name that's getting out there. I'll say it that way. There seems to be some indication that Rahab, I know the Lord's giving me how, because we've heard how he parted the Red Sea. We've heard what he did to the Amorite kings. We've heard. So there's something about that yes, Joshua's growing in fame. I get that. I'm not disputing that at all. I'm just saying I think there might be even more to that Joshua is telling people. It's not me. It's God.
Similar comments would have been said identically about Moses.
Absolutely.
Because he was held in great fear in Egypt. By the time the whole thing was over, people were very respectful of him, and that's why they poured out their belongings, because the name of the Lord was powerful, but Moses specifically received a lot of that credit.
Right.
And it's not, I mean, no, I'm not saying that it's the man that does that, but I'm just saying that would be an illustration that would be consistent.
Sure.
And it would be okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And where it says they trespass, it's just like Eric said, over and over again. Forgives them,
It's the cycle.
his man forgives them
It's the circle,
over
right?
and over.
Sin, cry, repent, forgive. Over and over. Chapter 7, verse 1. But, and this is, I like this, the way it's worded. The people of Israel broke faith. Notice it's not, God doesn't cut them off. God doesn't put them out. The people of Israel broke faith. Now, it's important to note what they broke faith with. They broke faith in regard to the devoted things.
Which verse is that?
Verse 1, chapter 7, verse 1. The people of Israel broke faith in regard to the devoted things. What devoted things? We don't have time to get into it, but what's he talking about chapter 7 here? He tells you.
All the belongings that came out of Jericho belong to God.
What did God tell them? That's not for you.
Everything.
I did this. That's not for you. Now, there will come a time, children of Israel, where I'll tell you, right? That's coming up. There's coming a time where when you run over somebody, I'll let you keep whatever. There's coming a time for that, but not Jericho. All right? Why do you think that is? Why does God get, and pardon my terminology here, why does God get, why is he withholding things from them in Jericho? Why do you think that is? Because it seems odd. You're going to give us Jericho, but you're going to tell us we can't take the stuff. Why does God do that? I'll float you my opinion. You can do with it what you will. And the next time I teach, we'll come back to this, which may be, who knows when, but we'll come back to this at some point. I'll float you my opinion. If the children of Israel come out of Jericho with all the trappings, and the other people get to see them all dressed up and decked out with all the trappings, who's going to get the credit for defeating Jericho? The people. God says, look, if there's one city that I want everybody to know I took out, it's the military stronghold in the land of Canaan. I did that. So you don't get to keep the stuff. I took care of that. It's a power move to, again, reiterate to Joshua and every other person in that camp. Be strong and courageous, not because of you. It ain't got nothing to do with you. I mean, I love you, and I'm doing this so that you can succeed. But you didn't do this. I did. And all the recognition and all the glory and all the honor should be at God's feet. Because he did it. And Achan messes that up. People get upset. I get it. There's people out there. I love them. But there's ultra sensitive people out there who get upset with God, which makes no sense. They get upset with God because of Joshua chapter 7. How could you kill this man and his whole family? How could you do that? How could you let that happen? Are you got to be joking, because you can't be serious when you ask that question. What did Achan do? Achan took the spotlight from God and tried to put it on himself. God said, I told you. I told you. So that's why verse 1 is so important in chapter 7.
Is this the first fruits of Canaan?
I told you.
Crops or whatever.
That's right. That's right. I told you not to do this. This is on me. This is mine. I get it. And Achan says, yeah, well, I know what you said. Does this sound familiar? I know what you said, but. That sounds like us, doesn't it? God, I know what you told me, but Before we jump down Aiken's throat, it's one of those, I better look in the mirror before I do that, because I'm very much, Eric said this last night, go back and watch it. He said, look, before you start pointing fingers, you better look in the mirror, because a lot of times we're guilty of the exact same thing. And in this case, I like verse 1 a lot when it explains really what the true problem is. You broke faith. Joshua, everybody else in the camp, have I not been faithful to you? Have I not done exactly what I said I was going to do? Have I not taken care of you? Have I not provided you over and over and over again? Have I not done that? Yes, I've done it every time. All I asked of you was to make sure that I get all the glory and praise for Jericho. And Achan, you didn't do that. So for every sin, there is consequence, right? It's a heavy consequence. It's a heavy consequence. All right, next time we get to study together on this one, we'll come back and start there. Thank y'all.